Thank you so much, Lucia, for joining us. It is Friday. We've got to the end of the week. We've done it together. Thank you so much. We're coming to you live from the studios of the National Television Network Government Information Service. I am Lucia Joseph. We'll be sharing lots of information with you this morning, and it's always a pleasure to have some very friendly faces around. And this morning we're saying welcome back to the Deputy Chief Sustainable Development and Environment Officer within the Department of Sustainable Development. She is Ms. Dawn Pierre-Nathaniel, and we also want to say a big welcome to Ms. Joanne Norville. She is the Science and Technology Officer. Two beautiful, competent women are here to discuss women in science. There's a forum and award ceremony coming up, and there's been a lot happening internationally in terms of advancing women in, you would hear the phrase STEM, and a lot has been done. And now I think they've even augmented it a bit, and it's now called STEAM. So we'll get to talk about that a little bit in our conversation. So we want to start with Ms. Nathaniel and a Women in Science Forum. And as I said, I know there's a lot happening within the region, here at home as well, to really get women involved. But to dedicate a forum to that, what would be the specific objective?
Okay, hello everyone. Again, thanks Lisa for inviting us here. It's really a pleasure to be here. But this forum, this Women in Science Forum, we know that this month of March has been really dedicated to women, as you said, internationally. And we wanted to recognize women in science. And we wanted to recognize that when we look at STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, we want to see our girls and women even more involved. We want to popularize science and technology and innovation for boys and girls, of course, but to ensure that our girls have a place when we look at STEM, to ensure that when you look at science, we're not only looking at the doctors, but we're looking at all the career choices and possibilities that exist, and we want students to think about as they make their choices for subjects, as they make their choices for their careers and their lives. Because science, face it, is really all around us, and we want to really embrace it. And this is what the forum is about, to encourage persons to embrace science and to push forward in helping us with sustainable development, where we're talking about environmental, socially, as well as economically.
Now you say science, and we all have our different understandings of what that is, and you began a little breakdown in terms of saying not just doctors, but it's such a broad scope. So give us a little more insight into the field of science.
Yes, indeed, you are so right. Science is really, really a broad area, and we see science in every aspect of our lives, every sector. Unfortunately, time will not allow me to go into its sector. But if I think of water, for example, let's think of Wasco, that the crew has to get the water pumped up from the dam. Sometimes they have to use gravity flow. They need to treat it to make sure that it is clean and safe for us. That is science. If we look at agriculture, we're faced with climate change. We therefore have to look at food security, our farmers. We need to be able to look at foods that are drought tolerant, salt tolerant, being able to resist pests and diseases. We need to do all of that, make sure the soil is fertile and all of that. That is science right there in the agriculture sector. If we think of fisheries, fisheries has fish aggregating devices of FADs, where they put them in the water to allow the fish to be attracted to them so that the fishermen don't have to go out as far to fish with the FADs. And that is science right there in terms of the fish being attracted to this device. But that is water, agriculture, that's fisheries, and there are so many other sectors. But there's also other science. When we wire our homes electrically, that is using science. When we ask the mechanic to fix our car, that is using science. When someone is really good at cooking and mixing and all the elements that they put into the food, the taste, the pleasure of food, that is good science right there. And you know, when you look at, let's say even straightening the hair, well, definitely not this hair, but we're talking about straightening the hair, that is science as well. So you really have science all around you. And we want to have persons look at science holistically and not just in the traditional manner of the doctor and the engineer, because really the sky is really the limit.
Yeah, you're right. There's science even in what we do as media practitioners. There's science as well in the various fields that, you know, when you do graphics, you look at color schemes and so forth. Even as a journalist, when you speak, there's certain words that you use and to evoke particular emotion and so forth. And so science is indeed all around. So, Joanne, the involvement of females in science, can you give us an idea of how far we've probably come? Perhaps the progress that women have been able to make, or their contributions to the field of science.
Okay, thank you for that question. In terms of women being active and making contributions to science, we have, females in the traditional scientific roles, such as the doctors, the engineers, the lab technicians, all around, even in the agriculture, fisheries, forestry departments, all these things, we have women represented, although not as, maybe not as much as we'd like on a global scale. There tends to be kind of an underrepresentation of women or females in science fields, but I guess we might talk more about that later. But for how far we have come, I think we have made quite a bit of progress. I think there were studies done a while back that did show, you know, women were definitely not even as highly represented as they are now in the fields of again, agriculture for sure, in terms of the farming, in terms of medicine. You just generally had a lot of male-dominated science careers. So we have come quite far, but there is still quite a way to go in terms of having that female representation and women represented in the fields of science. We do, although in the non-traditional scientific methods, have a lot of female innovators that are making their way as entrepreneurs, as innovators, using science. So like in the cosmetics production, those who make the soaps, the skincare products, you generally find it's women pursuing these kinds of things. You have people using agricultural products like honey to make hair products, and just using the natural resources we have, making eco-friendly cosmetics for, you know, catered to not just women, but to the general population, people who value sustainability, who value the eco-friendliness of the products that they use every day. You generally do find it's a lot of women making use of the natural resources to meet those demands in the markets. So we do have women kind of leaning into the non-traditional scientific fields, but even in the traditional science fields, the doctors, the engineers, and these things, we have some representation, and it's definitely better than maybe a couple decades ago, but we do still have quite far to go in those fields in that sense.
So locally, are we doing any sort of research, any study for us to be able to find what is our particular situation?
Right. Yes. Actually, recently, under this project that we're pursuing, that is, well, we'll talk more about the project activities as we go through the interview, but one of the project activities that the Department of Sustainable Development, in collaboration with UNESCO, one of the project activities we have been doing, or did do recently, was the perception of science in secondary schools. We had a project in 2013 where students in secondary schools were surveyed to find out what are their perceptions of science, what do they think of science, would they choose science subjects, do they like science, and these kinds of things. That survey was conducted in 2013, and the results were published in a report at that time, and then we actually recently had a follow-up survey to that using almost the same kinds of questions to see how the secondary school students' perceptions have changed over that time between 2013 and 2020, when the new set of surveys was conducted, when it was done. So we have, from that new set of 2020 responses, we have prepared another analysis report, and just last week on the 17th, we presented the findings of that perception of science in secondary schools report. And so that was a data-driven study that allowed us to see what are the perceptions, what are the attitudes of our students, both males and females, towards science in St. Lucia. And we were able to compare them in the report and present them to various stakeholders in the education and science fields at that time.
So what are the findings? What is it saying to us? What is the level of interest?
Right. Actually, some of the interesting findings were the students did value science even more now than in 2013. So they tend to have a high esteem of science, a high sense of the value and appreciation for science. They indicated, a lot of them, the majority, I think over 80%, both males and females, indicated that they do recognize that science is important for their daily lives. So not just in school, not just for studies, and I just want to pass an exam and get a job, but generally for their daily lives, they find that science is important. They agree that science is valuable. It applies in their homes, in the careers they want to choose, even if not many of them, or less than half of them, wanted science careers specifically, or figured that they wanted science careers specifically. At least they still recognize that science would be important for them to get where they want to be in life and get a job, maybe not a traditional science job, but a job that would, that they would be interested in. They recognize that, science is something that they need to get where they want to be. They find that science, many of them find that they perform well in science, at least at the Form 3 level, because we surveyed Form 3s both in 2013 and in 2020. So they found that their perception is that they perform well in science, and they generally like science, many of them, and they value the sciences. Those are positive results. Those are, they augur well for the future of science and just the general appreciation of science among secondary school students. But there is also the fact that they don't necessarily want to go into science careers or traditional science careers. There's, despite the high attitudes and high perceptions of science, in terms of their future, they may not necessarily want to lean in that direction. But that's that's something almost to be expected. There are so many other fields. There's business, there's accounting, there are all kinds of other fields and innovative ways that they can go in the future. They can push their future towards. But it is something though where, again, even as you mentioned, as a media professional, you use science. So there seems to be a little disconnect between them recognizing science as part of their daily lives currently, as opposed to as part of their future, what they want for their future. I know, or we know, that science, whatever job they go into, there's a high chance they will want to, or they will have to, perform well in science and do some kind of science. It will be involved in their lives and in their future jobs. But I guess we need to see how we can make that connection for the students as well.
It's yes. From what you're explaining to me, the right. findings, it's just it reveals so much, and it says so much.
Right.
But I'm tempted to go into another discussion, because on the whole International Women's Day front, because whether that perhaps intrinsically, while we may understand the value of the science, intrinsically we're just not wired like that as women, and I know that's not the discussion you came here for, and hopefully it's a conversation starter for you at home. Get into your groups and you could perhaps discuss that. Perhaps we're just not wired like that. But these findings for us, we have that information. You've presented it to various stakeholders. What is the hope of the department of where you want the findings to go, and how you think it should be utilized.
Right. So coming out of that report, we did have, like we mentioned, the presentation last week where we presented it to schools, principals, teachers, and other science-related stakeholders, science department stakeholders. What we want to do, though, is we want to continue to encourage recommendations to be sent in based on the report. So we will be sharing it more widely. We have shared it with some already, but we will be sharing it more widely, making it more publicly available to the schools, schools, teachers, educators, persons in the Department of Education, and in other departments, in other agencies that have an interest, have taken an interest in science in secondary schools and how it is presented, how it is taught in secondary schools. So we want that report to basically be a stakeholder collaboration where we use the findings, allow them access to the findings, and those stakeholders, those teachers, those science educators can then take the findings and use it to guide their planning and guide how they present science to the students, because there were some results as well about how the students prefer to be taught. We did, highlight those kinds of things. We highlighted the differences in how the males and females prefer to or believe that they perform, how they believe that they, how much they believe they enjoy the subject, and all these kinds of things. So now the findings of that report can guide future planning, lesson planning, curriculum planning, and these kinds of things. So that is what we hope to achieve with this report, and with all the stakeholder involvement, I'm sure it will be very fruitful.
Just in a cursory.
I'm sorry, but Lisa, incidentally, just as Joanne was saying this, it was just making me remember the participation that we had during the webinar, where the teachers were already finding some of the responses surprising, contrary to what they would have expected, and the discussion that ensued verbally, but also in the chat, where persons are already looking at those findings and seeing how we can use them to inform the way we work, the way we plan the lessons, the way we impart knowledge in terms of science in the classroom, and ultimately the way we influence the choices that students make in their lives, in their careers, where science is concerned. So we're really looking forward to using those results and having them incorporate them in what goes on as we plan for science and popularizing it in St. Lucia.
Just as a cursory, in terms of the learning, how much of that did the study speak to, in terms of, did it give you a clear indication of how girls learn versus boys, and what, perhaps what appeals to them most? The visual aid aspect, are they more into the sort of chalk and talk? Right. You can help us?
Yes. In terms of the girls versus boys, there were findings that were highlighted in terms of their differences in perception of, again, how they perform, how much they enjoy the subject, how much they feel pressured to perform well in science by their parents. These kinds of things were highlighted. In terms of what students generally prefer when they learn, when they are being taught, we do highlight that. I think that particular statistic of the preferred methods of instruction, the findings were the same for basically the boys and the girls. So we just presented that as generally how the students prefer to be taught. But and that itself was a very interesting statistic. It's for example, the chalk and talk, like we mentioned, it received a much more positive rating in 2020 compared to 2013. It was one of the lowest preferred methods, lowest ranked.
But we think we know why, though, Joanne. We think we know why, Lisa. Because, before we weren't using those visual aids much, all of the the digital means and the webinars and the videos. So everybody wanted this. It was new. But guess what happened in 2020 when the survey was conducted?
They just did not like it.
Because we just did it so much, because that's all we had, right? So because of the pandemic, we had online classrooms, we had a lot of look at the videos, go through this webinar. Everything was electronic, everything was virtual, everything was about digital means. So I guess students got a little bit bombarded that particular year. We did try to encourage them to think pre-COVID, but of course, when you're in the middle of the thing, you can't help but be colored in what you even answer in terms of what your perceptions on things. So we recognize that they do like it. They always did, but they did have quite a bit of it in 2020 when the survey was being done. Hence, that might have influenced the results. In fact, many of the responses we got, we also felt, Joanne, were influenced by the whole everything surrounding the pandemic and the protocols and all of that. It was quite interesting, and it was quite interesting.
It would be nice to do another as we are emerging out of the pandemic. School is back in. To see if they still feel this the same way in 2023. They may decide, hey, chalk and talk, we really don't like it anymore.
Maybe want to go back
digital.
But that's interesting. But then it also now opens up a whole other area for us to research about, the human behavior and responses to certain things. So that's a very, very interesting thing. Look, you're getting me interested now in a whole new field.
I guess we like a mix. I think we just like a mix, of things as humans. We just don't want too much of the same thing all the time. We like a mix.
And we also, we are on our, island, and we love to be able to look to the developed world, look at what's happening in the metropolitan cities and so forth, to guide us as to what. Certainly, as a young girl, I always fascinated by reading the magazines, looking at television, and that really does shape and help you make correct decisions. So at the international scene, Dawn, the movement of women in the science field, how important is that in terms of influencing our young women?
Oh, yes. The international world is certainly shaping things as well, where we've seen the trends over the years where we had very little involvement of women, where it is changing. Of course, we know that it's still difficult, more difficult in some parts of the world than in others, but we're seeing the shift. If we look, for example, at the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and perhaps look at the scientific body that is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. The IPCC is the scientific body, pure science, really, that deals with doing climate change assessments periodically for policymakers to help, and also looking at the impacts of climate change and future risks as well. And that information is made available to policymakers that allow us to use that in what we do. And this is the science that we use at the IPCC level to influence the cases that we make during negotiations at the United Nations Climate Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC negotiation process, where we increasingly see women more and more getting more involved in this. A gender action plan, for example, was developed under that process, where to ensure that women and men were equitably involved in climate action. And it has also been found, incidentally, through that same process, that where there are projects and programs implemented at the international level, at the regional level, or at the national or local level that do not involve women, they are found to be less effective. and that is coming straight out of that process and the studies that have been done, etc., and the trends over the years. So really, we really see that critical role of women, and it is increasing, it is improving, it is being enhanced. We still have a long way to go, but we are making some strides.
Any understanding as to why they would be less effective without that special touch of the woman?
I think that's an interesting question. I really do think we as men and as women, we see things differently. We bring different perspectives to the table. As women, we are mothers. As women, we've born children. As women, we have emotionally the way we view things, the way we look at the world. So all of these things sometimes influence because we bring that, it is intrinsically in us, but we bring that into everything we do. So at the end of the day, what it really tells us is it's really important to have that mix of men and women being involved equitably in everything we do, in our plans, in our implementation, in our monitoring, in all of what we do, whether that be locally, nationally, regionally, internationally. It just has to be done, and the use of science, as we see, as I said in the IPCC, is really a really good example of using science to influence everything from livelihoods, well-being, safety, security, and all of that. So it's really a fundamental use of science as we see at that kind of scale that is worth noting.
Ah, wonderful. So as we continue our own, strategies, plans, and to ensure that we increase the participation of our women in science, let's talk about the two-day activity. And in terms of the forum, let's discuss the Women in Science Forum first. We'll get to the awards.
Okay, right. So we are happy to host the Women in Science Forum, like you're saying, which is, like Don said before, a way of highlighting and promoting the accomplishments of women in science, but also sparking discussions on STEM education, on gender disparities, on the female performance in STEM education, as well as on the first day, that's basically the first panel discussion that we want to have. And then we will have an exhibition highlighting, again, women involved in scientific innovations. We'll have exhibitions like from honey to solar power to web design, all kinds of science and technology entrepreneurs and innovators will be exhibiting in the afternoon of the forum on day one. And then we will have actually a feature talk, a feature presentation by Miss Polius, who is an astrophysicist. She has her qualifications in as an astrophysicist, and she will be presenting a talk virtually about the space for St. Lucian women. That's the theme of that feature presentation. So, and that's kind of a play on words for space in terms of astronomy. Yes, and space for St. Lucian women. So that is, it's kind of a packed schedule, but it's going to be very fun, very involve a lot of innovation and spark discussions. The panel in the morning will share insights, all kinds of things, ways to get involved and ways to cater to everyone will be, discussed and will be involved in that first day of the forum. And then on the second day of the forum, which is the 30th of March, we will have in the morning a workshop involving or talking about STEM business incubation. So we will be discussing, investment opportunities, how businesses and innovators and entrepreneurs can leverage, the investment opportunities and any kinds of opportunities that present themselves for them to promote their businesses in STEM and using STEM and science and technology generally. And in the afternoon on day 2, we'll have a closeout workshop for capacity building for sustainable sisterhood. We'll have women basically forming a network and discussing how they can pursue, how they can promote themselves and inspire other young women to pursue science, to get involved in science, and to see the value and recognize science as part of what they would like to do in the future, and how they can just continue to grow as a network of, well, sisters in science. So that's our schedule, our packed schedule for day 1 and day 2. It will be fun, it will be engaging. It's a hybrid event which will be both in person and virtual, and we're really looking forward to engaging the participants, students, civil society organizations, government departments, other various agencies. We're just pulling everyone together to recognize and discuss women in science, which will also, there will be a male aspect to it. Of course, it's not just for women. Males will be invited, and males will also be involved in maybe some of the talks and presentations. But we do want to, I guess, get that gendered discussion in. We want to highlight that it's not just a science forum, but it's about women in science, and, you know, spark gender conversations related to science.
Now, how do you register? Is it registration is open? How does one become a participant?
Right. So registration for virtual participation, it's kind of open. We're open to various persons who are interested in participating. They can, I guess, contact the Department of Sustainable Development, or even just send an email to, I guess, my email address.
Yes, we can also put it, we are also planning to put the link for the virtual on the Facebook page as well, to allow persons who want to participate virtually. Of course, because of COVID, we know that we can't have the kind of numbers in person as we would have planned for under normal circumstances, but virtually, as Joanne was saying, we definitely are encouraging students especially, but not only students, governmental, non-governmental departments, public, private sector, civil society, the media, yes, please, of course, to join us and to ensure that we really push this popularization of science, technology, and innovation, but also...
Yes, and innovation, because just the discussion alone this morning shows us that there's just so much to the field of science, and I'm sure once the discussion gets underway over the 2-day period, individuals will get a fuller understanding of what they can do, and you may have people having some aha moments and saying, oh, look at that. Or sometimes you've been doing something and you're not, really relating it to, that sort of science aspect of things, and then people may now just be interested in going on and studying, getting more qualified, and so forth. And hopefully we can increase the number of Thanosian women in the field. So that would be great indeed. So some parting words, let's just start with Joanne, and then we'll get to Ms. Nathaniel after.
Okay, thanks. So yes, I just want to highlight, we're really excited to have this Women in Science Forum coming up, and the Women in Science Awards, where we recognize St. Lucian women who have been doing amazing things in science. We're not just in the traditional sciences, but in innovative sciences as well. So we're really looking forward to having this. We're really looking forward to sparking discussions, having everyone participate, and get that discussion going, build momentum off of that, build a network of women in science, and just have this blowing up and growing over time, starting with this forum.
So the awardees, Ms. Nathaniel, do they already know that they're being awarded?
We actually...
because I wanted some name drops.
Well, we won't do the name drops here.
Can you give us an indication, the particular field that we be in?
Yes, we do have
the categories. I'll settle for that.
Okay,
yes.
You'll settle for the categories.
Yes.
So we have categories dealing with food as medicine. We have a category dealing with post-climate resilience. We have a category where we've recognized a special individual who has contributed to science over the years, all her life, has retired, but has really contributed and should not be forgotten. We have the STEM Advocate was another one as well, where we have a young person who's been really pushing science and forming networks and making alliances, and we want to be able to recognize and continue to push her to do even more. Which one am I missing? There's also the Skin Glow one. And the Skin Glow one is important because people, what Joanne was saying earlier on about choices, business and science, you combine business and science. So you go into your own business where you make cosmetics, skin products, hair products. Some persons who will be exhibitors are making products from honey and other local things that, soaps and all kinds of things. That's science right there as well. So combining the business and the science. So so we didn't give you the names, so you will have to wait for the actual awards to actually hear the names, but we are recognizing, I believe, 5 key individuals. We know that there are many more people out there who are deserving of an award. We can't unfortunately recognize everyone, but we do hope to keep this going over the years, hopefully, so we can actually continue to push persons and recognize them and really, and who knows, maybe one of those days we might have men in science, but we will see. But
for now, my interest is piqued. But I want to know about the exhibition. Where's that taking place? Is that virtual as well, or?
Yes, we will have the exhibition as part of the forum, so in the same venue, in person. However, we plan to also have the virtual participants be able to view the exhibition through a roving camera on the day of the forum. So the virtual participants, or you won't be left out. You will get an opportunity to see and get the exhibition experience, the exhibition presentations on the day during the Women in Science Forum. And as well, we will also have a virtual exhibitor who will also be presenting an exhibition, presenting their products, which are eco-friendly products, some made locally. So it's just going to be a presentation of, the talent and entrepreneurship that we have, innovative uses of science in St. Lucia, both virtually and in person. So that will be, once you sign on, join the Zoom meeting, you will be able to enjoy that full forum experience inclusive of the exhibition.
And so the in-person is taking place where?
At the Finance Administrative Center, the FAC.
Yes.
But, our numbers are limited.
It's an invitation only.
So it's invitation only. So you must register in order to get there, and you are very confined by the numbers that you can allow in.
Very
COVID-19 still very much present with us.
Very much so, unfortunately.
The virtual is open to all interested.
Yes. So, Ms. Nathania, final words from you in terms of just, summing it all up for us.
Yeah, I would say that, as a Department of Sustainable Development, I always say that we have a role in terms of enabling and facilitating and supporting and mobilizing. And therefore, we're not able to do it alone. It's really working with various entities. For this whole effort that what we're doing right now, we are working with CAMDO, we're working with education, we're working with gender relations, we're working with innovation to really help us to bring this through. Because obviously, we have a one-man unit, really, at the Science and Technology unit, at the department. So it's all hands on deck if we really want to popularize science and technology. So we're hoping that the results of that study that we did on the perceptions in secondary schools in 2013 and 2020 can really be used and picked up by education and to try to use it and be informed with it, to really be able to contribute to making the changes that we need, to see the shifts in the system that we need to see, because we really do want to popularize science and technology. We want to ensure that students really go into the careers that are available. It takes a little bit of thinking, a little bit of innovation as to what you can do and where you can go. But if you think outside the box, there are really a number of opportunities. So we just need to be able to sell that and prepare our students to reach out and grab it, because it is there, the opportunity is there.
I never really knew that data analysis was an actual thing, and that it is such a huge career choice now.
Yes.
And people are finding themselves getting into that particular profession and loving it, and then it opens up so many other doors as well.
For sure.
And that's the thing. So data analysis, also within the science, that's something as that young people can really decide to get into. I want to thank you, ladies, so very much for sharing and for doing the work that you're doing. March isn't over yet. We're still celebrating the woman, and it is something that you need to avail yourself of. If you're perhaps considering, contemplating what is it that I really want to do. If you at school and you really don't understand where it is your path is going to go, that's the forum for you. Please try to register. Even if you are in one field and you're thinking of making a shift, that's the forum for you. So please go ahead and do that. Thank you so much, Joanne Norville. She is the Science and Technology Officer within the Department of Sustainable Development. And Ms. Dawn Pierre-Nathaniel, whom we always love having on. She's the Deputy Chief Sustainable Development and Environment Officer. Don't worry, Joanne, you'll be a favorite as well. Okay? We'll take a short break. We'll be back in a moment.
The world's climate is changing, and that affects all of us. Storms are becoming increasingly intense. Periods of intense drought and heavy rain stress farm animals and destroy our crops. Higher average ocean temperatures kill our coral reefs and change the migratory patterns of fish. St. Lucia contributes only 0.0015% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but is doing its part, along with countries around the world, to reduce the emissions that are warming our world and changing our climate. These efforts are called mitigation. But decades of emissions have already changed the climate, and the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere today will increase average global temperatures even more. We need to adapt, that is, do everything we can to prepare for and respond to the actual and expected negative effects of climate change, and everyone has a role to play. We need to protect our crops, build homes that withstand storms, and keep our drains and waterways free of garbage to help us recover or bounce back from climatic events. Learn more about the Government of St. Lucia's National Adaptation Plan and the steps you can take to protect yourself and your fellow St. Lucians.
What's in the food you're eating? Do you really even know? All the chemicals and hormones used to accelerate their growth. All the artificial flavoring, sweeteners and colors too. We consume and we don't spare a thought for the damage that they'll do. No, think about the children. Think about the children. How will we save them? Chemicals and GMOs are not the solution. Use organic and join.
Excessive agrochemical use, additives, and genetically modified foods are harmful to health and the environment. Join the good food revolution. Grow, buy, and consume organic. A message from Rise St. Lucia and the Ministry of Sustainable Development with funding from the GEF Small Grants Program, UNDP.
The good food revolution.
And thank you so much for staying with us. We want to switch gears. And the Ministry of Agriculture, they've been discussing, investigating the killing of a marine mammal over in Vieux-Fort. We turn now to Anicia Antoine for details on that.
Farmers immediately
not that.
The recent release of images and video footage of the capture and landing of a marine mammal in the Order Citation in Vieux-Fort has sparked not only public interest, but also gotten the attention of the National Authority for Fisheries and Marine Resources. Chief Fisheries Officer Sarita Williams-Peter, in an exclusive with the Agriculture Ministry's Information Dissemination and Communication Management Unit, explains the government's position on the capturing or harvesting of wild marine species. While some species such as killer whales, which got much public attention earlier this week, can be captured legally, it remains an illegal practice to capture the mammal within the island's harbors and bay areas.
Based on the distinguishing features of the animal landed, we have identified it to be an orca or killer whale, which is a toothed whale belonging to the oceanic dolphin family, of which it is the largest member. The department has been advised that the animal was not captured in a bay or harbor and can confirm that the fishing vessel was licensed to fish. As such, the captain and crew of the vessel complied with the requirements of the Fisheries Act, Caption 7.15 of the revised laws of St. Lucia. Further, the ministry advises that killer whales are considered data deficient on the International Union for Conservation of Nature Red List of Threatened Species, and as such are not listed as endangered species.
To push forward with the agenda of the National Fisheries Policy, the Department of Fisheries must align its interventions and policies with international and regional agreements and practices. In this case of the orca, Peters explains that the adoption of the Sustainable Use Policy does conform with the stipulations set out by the International Whaling Commission. For the Fisheries Department, the consensus is that cetaceans have been captured and used traditionally without causing harm to fisheries and other marine resources. Blackfish from the short-fin pilot whale is one of the most commonly consumed fish during traditional events such as Journée Créole.
Generally, we have not received any negative reports in terms of the animals' interaction with humans or other marine vessels. They actually are at harm when if they get a boat that strikes them because they move in the water. Maybe a vessel may not see them and hit them accidentally. We have received reports like that. Or we have received reports relating to beached whales, so animals that their echolocation have been thrown off by some activity and they have found themselves in a bay or a harbor. And that is why we do not permit the harvesting of these animals in bays or harbor, because we do not know if it was a disease issue that resulted in them reaching there.
While the Department of Fisheries acknowledges that marine mammals are charismatic animal species with symbolic values and widespread popular appeal, the Chief Fisheries Officer emphasizes the importance of maintaining balanced perspectives. From the Communications Unit of the Ministry of Agriculture, I am Anicia Antoine reporting.
Thanks, Anicia, for that. And now we move across to the farming region, Region 8. Well, the farmers there had an opportunity to meet with the parliamentary representative for Castries South East, Honorable Joachim Henry, and the Minister with Responsibility for Agriculture, Honorable Alfred Prosper. They discussed solutions to the issues that the farmers are being faced with right now.
Farmers in Region 8 are currently facing a number of challenges in the agriculture sector, including the impact of rising input costs and farm labor, as well as predial larceny concerns. In a discussion with the farmers, Parliamentary Representative for Castries South East, Honorable Joachim Henry, expressed the need for a farmers' cooperative in the region to address some of the concerns currently plaguing the farmers. He also emphasized the importance of ensuring the success of the agriculture sector to pique the interest of young people.
When you speak of the technology, when you speak of the farmers' cooperative, it is the farmers who can really usher in a mode of farming that would allow for them to engage young people. And this is why I'm promoting and supporting the farmers' cooperative. If the farmers' cooperative, the current farmers can demonstrate success, it will encourage the young people to participate. And how do you get the farmers to realize success? It's through the cooperative, farmers' cooperative, where they can take care of the small issues, and that will provide a platform or usher in a culture so that young people like to participate in ventures where they believe they can be successful. So it's important that in Castries Southeast, our farmers or the farming practices encourages our young people by demonstrating success at the marketing level, at the technological level, all of the areas that are of concern to the current crop of farmers. If it is not addressed, we will not find young people venturing into farming.
Minister with Responsibility for Agriculture, Honorable Alfred Prosper, noting that the issues being highlighted by the farmers are felt globally, particularly with the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, also lamented the importance of unity amongst farmers in the sector.
This is one area I must say is very critical to our farmers now. Forming cooperatives where we bring all our farmers together, especially now the high cost of farm inputs. Farmers can come together and they can now order or import the farm materials, the fertilizers and so on as a cooperative rather than the individual farmers are doing it, and it's really causing a problem in the sector. They can also benefit from getting resources from various agencies, maybe to set up the pack houses, to give farmer training, for farmer pension, a number of areas that can benefit the farmer as a result of the cooperatives. So this is one of the areas I really stressed upon in terms of encouraging farmers to form cooperatives, because that is one way of we addressing the whole food security issue, the high cost of inputs.
Minister Prosper reaffirmed the Ministry of Agriculture's commitment to improving the food security and livelihoods of St. Lucians as he continues to strategize on the best solution to the sector's current problems. From the Communications Unit of the Ministry of Agriculture, I am Anicia Antoine reporting.
Thanks again, Anicia, for that. With that, we come to the end of the morning update for this Friday. The weekend is here. Please remember that as you venture out, you know that we're no longer under confinement hours, but ensure that you're following all of the measures and protocols, guidelines set out for the management of COVID-19. COVID-19 continues to be very present with us despite the low case numbers that we've been seeing over the last few weeks. Let's make sure that we do not have another spike of COVID-19 here in St. Lucia. So continue to follow all of those safety protocols. I am Lisa Joseph. See you next time.